Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that leads to limitless opportunities. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach.
And I'm Anika Madden, and I am a parent. It is Thursday, December 20th, and welcome to episode number 47. What is a competitive ACT or SAT score? In this week's news, we're reviewing an article from the Washington Post on senators urging the U.S. News and World Report to overhaul the college ranking formula. And we're in chapter 47 of 171 answers, and Mark is explaining what could be considered a competitive ACT or SAT score. And this week's question is from a dad who wants to know what the total amount of debt his daughter should have through her PhD program. And Mark wraps up with Ashley Sempowski and the final part of what you need to know about community colleges.
Friends, every now and then we get a email that deeply moves us and touches us, and we like to read some of those with you. And we got such an email this week from Michelle from Washington State. And so Nick and I just want to read it to you. So here's what Michelle said. Happy holidays. I just want to write to tell you how much I appreciate this podcast. I've learned so much since discovering it a couple months ago. I am both a parent and also am taking courses in UC Irvine's educational consultant program. I've been doing some application essay consulting this past fall as well. I can tell this is a passion project for both of you, a real labor of love, and I appreciate the time, energy, enthusiasm you both display. I especially like the structure of each episode and the way the two of you play off of each other as an expert and a learning on the go parent. Also, thank you so much for including Mark's resource of the week in the show notes. Very helpful. I have a suggestion. I would like to buy your book, 171 Answers, but when I went to the podcast website, I couldn't find a link to purchase it. Odd, I thought, as that is one of the key components of the podcast. Perhaps it's there, but I just wasn't able to find it. If it is, perhaps you can make it more prominent on the webpage. I was wondering if you might be offering a holiday discount for the book or perhaps a giveaway. Many podcasts will offer a gift to randomly selected iTunes reviewers as a way to encourage people to leave reviews. On another note, I know you all are on the East Coast. I've noticed, though it's not at all unreasonable, that much of your discussion focuses on Northeastern colleges when you get down to the college-specific level. I live on the West Coast. Maybe a future podcast theme series could be looking at various colleges by geographic area, colleges that change lives, hidden gems, or great state schools, liberal arts by geographic area. Perhaps you've already done that. I'm just working my way now through all the episodes. Also, please sign me up for Mark's newsletter. Thanks again for such a great resource. And thank you, Michelle, for this. And Anika, what are your thoughts? Because I have a couple comments. What do you think?
Well, my thoughts are all on your comments, but thank you, Michelle. We greatly appreciate that. And we have been getting so many great responses from around the country. It's crazy. And it is very moving. And it does really inspire us to do better work. And we love the recommendations. I know Mark is always taking heed to them. And we're going to do our best to make it better for everyone.
And that's a perfect segue, because one of the reasons I wanted to read this letter was because of the feedback. And we improve our podcast when we get constructive feedback. Mm-hmm. And so I thought all 3 points Michelle made were great. First of all, we should have the book up on the podcast site, and we'll talk to Mark. Hey, we did that on Sync. That was pretty cool. So we'll reach out to our web designer on that. As for a holiday discount, I think that's a fantastic day. We're in the holiday spirit. And the third point Michelle made, I thought was also fantastic, is I've been on the East Coast for 19 of the 20 years I've been involved in admissions. So a lot of my contacts are East Coast based, but we are absolutely going to be more balanced moving forward. Just ask that you'll be patient with us on this one, because most of our interviews are lined up through June, but you'll see a lot more West Coast and even Midwest interviews and even articles moving forward. So thank you for that as well, Michelle. Couple of things I want to do. If you buy the book at 171answers.com, and we have a version, just has a couple typos. I don't think you'll even notice them. But if you put in the coupon code 5OFF, FIVEOFF, not only will I send you that version of the book, but also I'm going to email you the 3 sources I use to find merit scholarships.
Awesome.
And And if you want the book without the typos, I can't do the 5 off, but I'll still do the 3 resources I use to find merit scholarships for my clients. So you just have to email me and say, send me the materials, and we'll be good to go. But thanks a lot, Michelle, for that. And that's how we get better, is by input from our listeners.
That's right. Love it.
Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, this week's article is entitled "Senators Urge the U.S. News and World Report to Overhaul the College Ranking Formula." And we find this in the Washington Post. It is written by Mr. Nick Anderson, very recently, actually. And so, Mark, 6 Senate Democrats sent a letter to Brian Kelly, who is the editor-in-chief content officer for the U.S. News and World Report. And they sent it in response to these recent revisions that were made to the 2019 college rankings and their effort to recognize schools that boost social mobility for students from lower income families. However, the senators are pointing out to Mr. Kelly that the rankings haven't come close to giving credit to those schools that do the most for underrepresented and disadvantaged students instead of the privileged few. And here is just one line that's taken from the letter. And they're saying that we join others in questioning whether the changes represent a true embrace of social mobility, as your ranking system still fails to consider the extent to which colleges enroll historically underrepresented students. And Mark, this article is essentially, well, it really is, it's a publication of the letter itself and the response from Brian Kelly himself back to the senators, which, by the way, sounded to me like Brian Kelly was saying, hey, we've actually done a pretty good job of what you claim we're not doing. Our rankings have always been great. And by the way, quote, we think that measuring academic excellence and rewarding schools that enroll, retain, and graduate their students, regardless of economic status, is a necessary and apolitical undertaking. Apolitical meaning not political undertaking. And so, Mark, sounds like a slapboxing match to me. Mm-hmm. What did you make of all of this?
Well, first of all, I agree 100%. And Brian Kelly always does that when people push back on the rankings. I've been seeing that now for quite a while. Is basically saying we got our act together in essence. But taking a step back, so got to give a shout out to Brendan Barnard. Had him on our podcast for 3 interviews, and we've read many of his articles. He wrote the most articulate denunciation I've ever seen of the rankings in the Washington Post about 1 month before this. You all, I urge you to Google Brendan Barnard Washington Post college rankings. And it was so articulate. In fact, we had talked about having that as one of our news articles to discuss. But there's no doubt in my mind that Brendan's article precipitated this response. And so let's talk a little bit about the response. First of all, for 6 senators to write the U.S. News, asking them to change the rankings, there's something implicit in that. And what is implicit in this, that these rankings must be very powerful if we feel a need to get involved. And it is absolutely true. It is absolutely true. One of my clients I worked with 6 years ago, her mom was on the board of trustees at one of the most well-known and prestigious schools in this country. And she would talk to me about how frequently the board would talk about where this school was in the rankings and what can be done to improve their spot in the rankings. And so what happens is that message goes from the board of trustees down to the presidents, down to the VP of enrollment, to the director of admission, down to the staff, and it impacts how decisions are made. And you might say, well, that's dumb. That's silly. Why would you do that? Well, there was a Cornell study some years ago that showed just moving up a few slots in the rankings can substantially increase the number of applications you get and the number of students who choose to enroll if they're admitted. And moving down a few slots can substantially decrease the number of applications you get and your ability to get the students to enroll if you admit them. So as a result of that, everybody is nervous when the rankings come out. Oh, my goodness, are we going up or down? Because they know the direct correlation it can have on how hard it is to do their job. So another thing that's implicit in this article is, in the senator's letter, is that there must be something U.S. News is not doing that they want to see happen. And really it boils down to this. When you really look at the U.S. News rankings, they primarily evaluate schools based on 3 factors: the wealth of the institution, the caliber of the students the school is able to attract, and the prestige and the reputation of the school. And while there's a place for all of those, that is not a complete picture. And another very important factor that historically has always been valued and prized by colleges, by universities, especially public schools, is that they have been seen as engines of social mobility. They have been seen, in other words, as institutions that had a prominent role in moving people from the lower middle class, lower middle class, up into more opportunities. That has been seen as part of the responsibilities. But what the rankings have done by not valuing any of those factors, they have caused schools to focus on things that will improve their spot in the rankings. And those things tend to favor privileged and more affluent families. And so that's why, and we talked about this in other podcasts, that there are now 38 schools that have more students from the top 1% economically, in other words, incomes of over $630,000, than they have from the bottom 60%, which is incomes of under $65,000. And so one thing I've learned in my life, and I didn't make this up, someone told me this quote, but it's so true: what gets inspected gets expected. So as long as you're inspecting something, you're going to get that result. And so what these senators are saying is, why don't you start credit colleges who make an investment in lower income kids, middle income kids, working class kids, first generation kids, and reward those schools for making that investment in your rating system? Because if you do that, rankings are so powerful, they will certainly make the choice to invest there. But as long as you're going to look at things like graduation rates, selectivity, retention, and class rank, all things that are going to favor kids coming from highly educated, affluent families, then that's what schools are going to go after. And basically what they're saying is talent does not only reside in zip codes of the most affluent families, but why is it that the most selective schools and the ones that show up at the top of your rankings are not taking a population that is anywhere close to reflecting the country at large? So what are your thoughts, Anika?
I think I agree with all 6 of them. And honestly, Mark, I mean, we're just a family that have never really invested in college rankings because we've just never been in that place. So I can't speak to like the change or the improvement and all that good stuff. Mostly because we've been following your work so closely. But I just never really subscribed to them. But I do know that even my own, alma mater, that's a badge of pride. That's a big deal. We're a public institution. And we wear that, that we wear that badge proudly. But I just wonder who's really paying attention to those. Is it just the kids in the affluent communities because they're the ones that are being more selective? Or I don't.
No,
is it everybody?
Yes. Yeah, you are by far the exception to not be looking at this, by far. And so
really,
yeah, that's why it has such a ubiquitous impact. Now I want to give you a
clearly, to your point about these senators taking the time, because I thought about that too. I was like, these are some pretty heavy hitting names up here that are going after this. So clearly, I understand that there is a huge, there is something there. I'm not taking away from that. But it's just, to me personally, fascinating that, people are so invested in these rankings that I don't know. I just cannot relate. I'm sorry.
No, and I want to give U.S. News a little bit of credit. So, and this is one of the things Kelly did say in his response, is for the first time ever, they at least had some aspect of incorporating how a school is doing with moderate to low income kids, right? So 40% of kids receive the Pell Grant, between 39 and 40%, just call it 40. And so this is the first time ever they did look at, are you graduating these kids that you bring in with Pell Grants? And they did put a very small factor of that into their college rankings. So this is the first time they've ever done that. And so I do give them a little bit of credit for that, but there are other competing rankings out there. And if you look, for example, at some of the other rankings that are out there, there's some of them that do put a big emphasis on this. But it just happens that U.S. News was the first one to get into the rankings game, and they're still perceived as the gold standard.
Right.
And so they're the ones that still have the most influence on the public at large. And I have to say, one of my clients sent me this article. Shout out to Bridget Williams. she forwarded me this, like, welcome to my morning. Said, Mark, have you seen this? So this is a pretty big deal. And there's a lot of buzz on this subject. And so we were planning on talking about something else, but we bumped this all the way to the top.
Well, there it is. And I tell you what's going to be interesting is 2020 for sure, right? Because one thing Brian Kelly also says, hey, let's sit down, let's talk about it, let's get your input, some more discussion around it. So let's see how far these 6 senators can take it. Let's see how much impact they can see how much change they can affect in all of in these efforts. And I think 2020 will be the determining factor in that. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think this is going to be more of a protracted, elongated battle. I mean, you've got people like Lloyd Thacker and others who have been skewering the rankings for decades because when you work in an institution, you really see how this focus on the rankings actually, first of all, it leads to incredible amounts of stress because it leads to a lot of the mental health problems because they feel like losers if they don't go to one of the very top numbers. And early action decisions came out this week, Anika, and half my kids got in their first choice, half didn't. But for those that didn't, a lot of them, I had to do some different consoling for them because a lot of times they weren't feeling that great about themselves. And part of that is the focus on the rankings, which give a false precision of accuracy that school number 13 is better than school number 21, according to whose values, theirs or yours?
Absolutely fascinating. I cannot. Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, listeners, this is the part of our podcast where we take one chapter from a book I wrote called 171 Answers, which are the most frequently asked questions I get as a college coach. And we just touch on each one of those questions because if I get them, then you are oftentimes asking them as well. And we want to try to scratch where you itch and meet your needs. And so we're sort of in our test prep section now where we're taking a lot of the test prep questions I get, and we're doing all of them in a row, and then won't be on test prep or test scores for the rest of at least up into 171 episodes. So one of the frequently asked questions that I get is, what is a good SAT score or what is a good ACT score? And that's the subject of this segment of our podcast. Anika, what were your takeaways from this chapter?
Okay, so 2 takeaways. The first one is the one that I always have to sit and concentrate on, and that's the percentile. Understanding how the percentile works, where, okay, your kid scores in the 65th or the 75th or the 80th or the 90th. And that means, and this is where I have to meditate, that means that your child... I do. I always get a bit...
You are so true. You really are not a math person, are you? You've told me that many times.
No, I'm not. I mean, it is what it is. I embrace my mathless.
Guess what? I am not a directions person. I got lost in Atlanta the other day. In Atlanta, I couldn't find where I parked my car. I'm walking around for 2 hours trying to find my car. And then my cell phone died. I was like, what am I going to do? So,
and we're even. We're even.
Exactly. So I can't be critical of you, Anika.
But anyway. So for example, Naya scores in the 75th percentile on the test. So, I mean, she scored higher than 75% of the students that took the test.
Bingo.
That's one thing.
That's it.
Yay.
That's it.
And then the second point is that, okay, so what is a good score? Relative. Okay, what school are you applying to? Because if you make I'm just throwing out a number. If you make a 2,000 and that school only needs a 1,600, that 2,000 is excellent. But guess what? All you needed was a 1,600. So it matters most to the schools that you're applying to and how they're comparing your child to the other applicants and or students that have been admitted. So two critical takeaways, I like to say.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why this is an important question is particularly true for students in upperly mobile suburban communities as well as private school communities. They really have a tendency to beat themselves up a lot and have a tendency to think their score is not any good. And once again, as you said, scores are it's all relative, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's all relative to the schools you're applying to, but there is somewhat of a common benchmark. If we look at national averages, a national average for the SATs around 1060 for students that actually go to college, and 1060 who take the test, a little bit higher for students who actually matriculate and go to college. And for an ACT, it's usually most years either a 20.8 or a 20.9. And students are oftentimes shocked to hear that. I will have students, just this week, I had a student, they got a 12.10, and my goodness, you would have thought they got a 0, They're beating themselves up so bad. And I had to stop back and say, okay, let's take a look at this here. It's that score. Sure, it's not a score that's going to be competitive at Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Stanford, MIT, and many and several other schools, but it's a score that's still significantly better than the national average. And so let's just take a look at some raw numbers to put things in perspective. So I'll do SAT and ACT. So if your score is a 1410 on the SAT, of which I probably have, I don't know, maybe 15, 17 kids this year that have that score, you're in the 95th percentile. Okay, you're in the 95th percentile. If your score is a 1340, then you're in the 90th percentile on the SAT. If your score is a 1240, you're in the 80th percentile. If you have an 1170, you are in the 70th percentile. If you have an 1110, you're in the 60th percentile. And of course, we mentioned the 50th being right around that 1060 number. And then if we go over to the ACT, once again, I find the exact same thing. People will be like, Anika, do you remember the story I had at the end of that chapter?
I do, where the student basically did what you said, where they beat themselves up because they got a certain score, correct, but they didn't.
It was a 26.
Yeah.
A 26.
Right.
Okay. A 26 is the 83rd percentile. They're beating themselves all up about their 26. You did better than 83% of the country.
Right.
And so I wanted to highlight this just because I just feel our kids are under a lot of pressure and they're constantly beating themselves up. So let's just look at some ACT numbers. All right. Like a 30, between a 30 and a 31 will put you in the 95th percentile. Really, really a high score. Right. About a 20, between a 28 and a 29 will put you in the 90th percentile. About a 25.5, right in that range, you're in the 80th percentile. And then it continues to go that way. A little bit more than the 23, 23.1, 23.2, you're now in the 70th percentile. And the 60th percentile is like a 21.5 was really the 60th percentile. And then, of course, the 50th being a high 20 score. So I really just I want people to realize that not everybody is acing this test, okay? And your score is oftentimes a lot better than you think it is. But the other point is also really important as well, Anika. Look at the scores of the schools you're applying to.
Right.
If your scores put you in the middle 50th percentile, all other things being equal, like your grades are there, first of all, if it's a school that just does admissions by the numbers, you've got what you need most likely. But if it's holistic admissions and you've got pretty good recommendations, a lot of other factors, I'm not going to go into all the holistic factors. We've done that in other broadcasts, so we'll continue to do that. You're going to be a competitive applicant. And so stop beating yourself out there, kids. There's a school for everybody. There's certainly open enrollment schools. There's schools that take kids that are under the national average. 82% of recent college presidents were concerned that they would open at full enrollment this year. Okay, so there's a myth out there that every school has got these really, really high scores out there. No, they don't. And guess what? Here's the other thing we have to mention. When kids are in this school world, boy, test scores seem like the most important thing. Even grades, the most important thing. And I have to tell people. So I graduated like 30 years ago, from college, and I have never even had one person ever ask me what my test scores were. And so students, I know it's hard because you're in that world and prestige is conferred according to people getting all these national merit scholars and all that, but it just isn't the most important thing in life. It just isn't. What do you think?
Right.
What do you think, Anika?
But Mark, but here's one good point that our test prep tutor just reminded me this week. In terms of the school, like for example, Naya's schools, her list of schools that she wants to that she's considering,
Right.
it's not going to be the challenge of getting in. It's
Mhm.
about the money.
Right.
So we know that she's going to have to, get certain scores to get the financial merit aid that she's definitely going to want to get or need to get. So that's definitely a distinction that I would want to make.
Well, let me say something.
But outside,
let me say something. I'm glad you brought that point up because I'm not trying to say scores are not important. I'm certainly not trying to say that message. For certain schools, if you don't have certain scores, you're unlikely to be admitted. But what my point is that if that's the case, guess what? It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there. And there's another school that will have opportunities that'll be boundless. Go there, rock it, crush it, and you'll be on your path to a nice, successful career.
Shapayo.
What is that? What is Shapayo? What is that?
Like that's my new version of there it is. Okay. I always say, and there it is.
Yeah. Is that some foreign language? Is that Pig Latin or something?
I'm trying to switch it up a little bit.
Just making sure you're not speaking in tongues over there on me.
Oh my gosh. There, I go switching it up.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Mark, we have a question from a gentleman, a dad, Greg from College Park. And he wants to know, what is the total amount of debt my daughter should have through her PhD program? What is it, Mark?
It's a great question. And for those of you who didn't hear episode 9, I gave my view on what I feel is a sustainable and reasonable amount of undergraduate debt. You can go back and listen to that. We're not going to rehash that here, but if you want a conversation on undergraduate, episode 9, that question came up, but that was like almost 40 episodes ago. So for grad school, and I cannot state what I'm going to say often enough or emphatically or ardently enough. This is my opinion, what I'm going to share. I'm fairly conservative when it comes to debt. So I do believe that you can take a little bit more graduate school debt out because you're closer to making money, you're closer to employment. I think it's extremely important that you are, one, you fully research the field you're going into, you're good at that field, and the market is there for you, opportunities are there for you. So I think that's essential. So once you've done all that pre-screening, you're a good match for it, opportunities are there, you're passionate, you love it, all that, you can go for it. But what I like to see on the graduate level is you should not take out more graduate debt, school debt, than your net income or after-tax income will be 5 years out after graduation, right? So for example, I'm going to give you some real numbers. Right now, well, this is 2016 numbers, Anika. The average medical school debt was $190,000 that students have at med school. And guess what? Guess what the average dental school debt is, Anika, in 2017?
Is it higher than that? I hope not.
It is higher than that. It is $287,331.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a client I'm working with right now, Dennis Marriage, and they were the first one who told me that. They're like, Mark, students are taking $300,000 to $500,000 out for dental school now, and I was like, what? And I did some research.
Do dentists make more than doctors? What the?
Well, it depends if you specialize, what you specialize in. I know those endodontists, they make a lot, but it's a lot like doctors, right? So primary care physicians, pediatricians, big difference between orthopedics and heart surgeons, and you know what I mean? Depends on what your specialty is. But
right.
So it's a lot of debt. And so if you say well, wait a minute now. Because the average dentist actually makes $118,000 as a median entry level salary, and then $153,900 is really the overall average dentist. So you're saying, well, then you shouldn't go to dental school if it's going to be $287,000, and you're talking about I'm probably going to make $153,000. And so, what do you think my answer to that would be, Anika?
No, I'm still stuck on it. I cannot believe that amount of debt. That's sorry.
You know what? Guess what it is? It results in $3,000. That's a $3,000 monthly payment, and that's using income-based repayment. That's using moderate payment, $3,000 a month. And I have a lot of dental and doctor clients, so this is something that I talk with them a lot about, and a lot of them still have their their medical bills, or their dental bills. So we talk about this. But what do you think? Do you think that I'm saying that you shouldn't go to dental school if it's going to be $287 and you may make $150? What do you think? Should nobody be a dentist then?
Let me stray away from my personal opinion, because
I know one thing: you're not going to be working on teeth anytime soon.
Ain't gonna be no teeth drilling in here. No, and
if Janae or John want to be a dentist, I have a feeling you might have a serious pep talk.
Man, sidebar. I bought Stephanie Espy's STEM gyms. I'm about to make them all the new fields. Sorry, audience, but I had to throw that in there. In terms of really trying
to. Also on episode 9. She was also on episode 9.
Oh, look at that! Look at that. Yeah, so I just feel like, I don't know. I honestly, Mark, I know of more than 2 people, honestly, that have gotten advanced degrees that don't work in their fields, and that concerns me. Because it's a big deal. You get your master's, you get your doctorate, all this stuff, but they're not doing anything. So I just go back to your point about really the research and just really understanding what your opportunities are going to be in advance of everything that you're doing, because it's a reality. I've seen it personally happen where people go get these higher degrees and they don't do anything with it, and it's craziness to me. But it's out there, and I just, God bless them, but I just can't imagine that debt for nothing. And certainly not saying that this is the case for this dad, but I just want to make that point. Is this, I don't know. It's hard, Mark, for me. I just can't remember.
Yeah. If you're gonna do it, you need to be all in. Having said all that, I actually think that both doctors and dentists are excellent opportunities. Now you say, well, wait a minute, that does not compute with what you just said. You said I might make $150 and I'm going to probably have $287, and you said you should be making what you make 5 years out. So here's the thing. There are some things you can do. So let's talk about some of the things you can do. 1, you can save. Okay. You can save up ahead of time so that you're not taking all that. 2, you can take time off and work between when you go to dental school. Some people, not all, but some people have parents, grandparents, relatives who help. Not, many don't, but some do. Now, there's some other things. There is what is known as public service loan forgiveness. All right. In most cases, you do need to work in what's known as an HPSA, which is a health professional shortage area. It's like more of a distressed area. Right. And if you work in a health professional shortage area, then you can qualify for having large portions of that money expunged off of your obligations. After 10 years. So that's one way to get you down to that limit. Another thing is kind of similar. You can work in a high risk area. So the National Health Service Corp, NHSC, has a loan repayment program. And there's a variety of health professions, including dentists, that can get up to $50,000 in loan repayment assistance by committing to a 2-year service agreement. And some of them will even extend that beyond 2 years. So there are ways of getting around it. Anika, I'll tell you this is, I'm not kidding, almost 20 years ago, I was in San Antonio and I was just visiting, and there was a big sign up, and I'll never forget it. And it said, we are paying $150,000 for bilingual dentists as a signing bonus.
Oh, wow.
Now that's a nice way to cut into your debt.
Right.
You just took that 287 down to 137. So I'm not saying don't do some of these professions that have more debt, but I don't want you to be like 2 people. I actually had a meeting today, Anika, couple $100,000 from law school and didn't end up passing the bar. So it's really sad. So they're like, and then another student of mine, one of my favorite students I worked with, I recruited, I visited him. He's finishing up his PhD out in California at Claremont Colleges. They have a graduate school there in Claremont, California. And he was over $200,000 in debt. I lost touch with him, and he was going to come out and make 80 grand. And so that's what we don't want to see.
But can I throw this in there too, Mark? Because my Jalen, oldest child, about to graduate in May, he has really been talking a lot about investing, and he's joined an investment club, and he, it's a couple one of this,
Good for
it's
him.
so insightful. This child of mine, oh my goodness, we had this really great conversation where he says, he too wants to go into medicine. He wants to be an anesthesiologist assistant for now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the plan. And he's saying, but he knows that's not where his wealth is going to come from. And he recognizes that his investments have got to be long term and they've got to be thoughtful. And he's putting a lot of time and and planning around that. And I've really applauded him for that. I was so proud of him. And so I just want to throw that out there that's it's loan forgiveness, all that stuff too. But these days, multiple streams of income, we talk about that for days, right? But smart.
Well, not only that, I was talking to a different one of my clients, and this is actually a Dr. Marriage, and he does the investing. They do the investing as a couple, but they also have real estate.
Right.
They got all these properties.
Exactly.
All these properties. I was talking to him. He's like, you got to diversify.
Right.
You got to have income from your career, and you got to have your investment income. And they've made some very, very savvy investments. And then you got to then you got to also know how to invest in the stock market. So anyway, we're going in the direction of an investment podcast.
Well, but I'm gonna tell you, but if you're talking about how much debt I need to take out, you need to understand how to get rid of it. And those are real ways, real positive ways that our kids really should start thinking about. They got a lot of work to do in the work that they're trying to accomplish, but we got to kill about 4 birds with 1 stone here. So let's just put it about 5, right? And let's just put it on out in the atmosphere for you, Greg. That's for you.
In the second half of my interview with Ashley discusses how applicants that apply from community college are evaluated. She also talks about the growing trend of community colleges to offer 4-year degrees, and she gives her opinions on this. Then Ashley shares a few additional things about community colleges that we just have not discussed already. I then put her on the hot seat, and we get to see the personal side of Ashley a little bit. And finally, she tells us what Springfield College is doing, and she shares the exciting programs that Springfield College is offering right now.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
So how do you evaluate the application of a student that applies to you from a community college, Ashley?
Sure. Well, this can actually change from school to school, but mostly the policies are pretty similar. Our policy, transferred courses have to be a 100 level or higher, and the student had to have received a C- or higher in the course. Then we look at the school's catalog and read course descriptions to see the similarities between the courses at our school and at the previous institution. If needed, we sometimes need to seek syllabi or additional course information, but usually just from looking at a transcript, we can quickly evaluate which courses will actually transfer in and what their equivalencies will be. And this process is actually the same whether they've spent 1 term at the community college or they finished their associate's degree or beyond. And once we have evaluated courses from certain schools, it makes future evaluations from those schools go more quickly because we can build up a database of what has been evaluated, what courses a student from that school will receive equivalent credit for.
That's good. And I'm really glad that you emphasized that is definitely going to vary from school to school. But that was really helpful. Now, more recently, Ashley, there's been this trend toward community colleges offering 4-year degrees themselves. And do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I'm actually an avid supporter of this. And it's mostly because, we touched on it earlier. College costs have increased so drastically that a college education may actually seem out of reach for many people. So with community colleges offering 4-year degrees, those students that may have previously been unable to afford a traditional college education may now do so, and without sacrificing any academic quality whatsoever.
Oh, I love it. Anything to help curtail the cost of college and still get people in jobs doing something they love. I'm all for it. So I have to support and agree with you 100% on that. I know a lot of the 4-year public and even private colleges don't like it because that's increased competition for them. But you and I are very sensitive to affordability. So definitely thumbs up for that movement, in my opinion, as well. Anything you haven't shared so far about community colleges you wanna add?
Just that community colleges are a great alternative option, and as are non-traditional programs. Just like more community colleges are offering 4-year degrees, many non-traditional colleges and universities are popping up, allowing students to complete their degrees on their own time without sacrificing their work and life responsibilities. And a lot of these schools also offer credit for prior learning, certifications, and skills that the student may have, allowing them to finish their degree even sooner. This is the model that my school, Springfield College, uses, and I'm so excited about it. Students are excited about it. And, all in all, as we're getting more students educated, giving them the degrees and allowing them to go back out into their community and be change agents. So that's what's important to me.
Ashley, you actually said something that's really important in your response. So, community colleges do a good job at preparing students to transfer into 4-year schools. A lot of them do. But a lot of times they also do a really good job of having 2-year programs that have practical skills that are employable. And I know, we're talking about community colleges here, which are not the same as technical schools. But I find community colleges, because they know there's a certain percentage of students that will want to go into the workforce after 2 years, right? Not everyone's going to transfer. They are very much attuned into what skills are students going to graduate with, and are they marketable skills? And a lot of times, even the professors are practitioners that have actually been doing, the work in the field.
I've definitely seen that. I see a lot more applied associate's degrees, which are more of these 2-year hands-on programs, giving the students the skills that they need to go back out into the workforce and move up.
So that's great. So listen, Ashley, we're going to wind down now. And this is a part, but before I wind down, I always do this little part on our podcast with interviewees that I don't tell you about in advance because you might turn me down. I call it putting you on the hot seat here. And it's just kind of fun. It's kind of fun. It sort of rolls back the curtain from Ashley, admission officer, admission counselor, to just a regular human being. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions. We call them our Fave 5, and you can just tell us your answer. So let's start with your favorite food.
My favorite food, I'm honestly tied between Mexican food and sushi. I could eat sushi all the time, but I have lived in Mexico before. The first time I went to Mexico was while I was a student at Westtown during my senior project. I've gone back twice since, and I just absolutely love the culture, the food. So, it really is that tie between Mexican and sushi, I have to say.
So, I joked earlier around when I said you can send me a portion of your salary for helping introduce you to admissions. And in reality, I do like to, when I see my former students, I like to go to a restaurant and get caught up. And I usually treat. But sushi, it definitely is going to be it, because I'm a huge sushi person too. So when next time I see you, Ashley, sushi for sure, definitely. So let's talk about.
We'll make it happen.
Yeah, we most definitely will, especially because you're not that far from Philly, and I get back to Philly, quite a bit. So let's talk about this. What's your favorite place to vacation?
Favorite place to vacation.
And this could be a dream place too. This could be like your dream place to go, or a place you've been at. It could be either one.
Well, I feel really blessed, to have been able to have opportunities to go to Mexico, and also travel Europe. My husband was stationed in Italy for a couple years right after we got married, for the Air Force. So we were in Italy. We traveled to a lot of European countries. So I feel blessed to have been able to see more than, the average person gets to see in a lifetime. But it's so funny because my family's been going to the Outer Banks, North Carolina, for so many years. I think since I was in 2nd grade, that was the first year we went. We go every Christmas, the entire family, like 40 of us, in a big house on the beach. And we're just there for the holiday, for the Christmas holiday, and spending time together, sharing gifts and eating food and just having a good time. So that's always the vacation that I look forward to. the most.
That better be a big house for 40 people.
Oh,
That's a big house.
it is. It's a very good time.
So the third is your favorite TV show.
Oh my. Is it weird to say that I'm obsessed with like true crime dramas? I
No,
don't
not
have
weird.
a favorite show in particular, but I just love to watch anything true crime related. I feel like, if my admissions career ever goes down the drain, maybe I want to get into criminal justice a little bit.
I don't think that's gonna happen. You're a budding star. You're gonna do really well here. The fourth is your favorite book, and that's been really hard for people. So I'm starting to feel sympathetic, and I'm saying your favorite book in the last few years. I'll take that as well.
That is not going to be difficult for me. I read this book the first time in 10th grade at Westtown, and I've read it so many times since. My favorite book is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I just love it. I love Fitzgerald's writing in general, but The Great Gatsby is just such a hopeless, romantic story, and it just gets me every time.
That's great.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
The recommended resource for week 47 is another blog. It's college-kickstart.com. And I use this blog for tracking early decision and early action data because they've got an excellent blog that shows the early decision and early action results for a lot of schools. Every day they're uploading new schools. You can see how many students applied, how many were admitted, what the admit rate was, and even more helpful, there's a link to the actual articles on the school's websites. There's school newspaper articles on the school's results. So fantastic resource if you want to know what's going on, if you want to know the trends and how many kids were in and how many were deferred and how many were admitted, how many were denied. You can get that data right now by going to college-kickstart.com. Now return to my interview with Ashley Sempowski. And then the last question is your favorite dose of advice for students or parents who are listening.
I always say that a conversation is the first step towards your future. So I know the information out there about colleges and universities and 2-year schools, 4-year schools, trade schools. Everything that's out there can be so overwhelming, particularly for first-generation college students. So I always try to make myself extremely accessible and open to students. I want them to know that they can call me, they can text me, they can email me anytime if they have questions, because my goal is to make them comfortable. This is a major decision that they are about to make. And to make a decision like this, you need to be comfortable. You need to be trusting. And if they can't trust me and they cannot have open dialogue, open, honest dialogue with me, then it's not going to work out for them. And I really just want everybody to understand that, don't be afraid to ask those questions. Don't be afraid to have a conversation. Your admissions counselor is not this scary, unapproachable person. We're here, to help you and guide you and help you feel comfortable in this next transition in your life.
I love it. I love it. So, Ashley's humble, but Ashley won a very, very, very competitive scholarship to go to Westtown School through what's called the Lenfest Foundation Program through Jerry Lenfest. Was he the founder of Comcast, Ashley, or the co-founder of Comcast? He had some connection with Comcast.
Yes, he had sold the company. He had sold it wasn't Comcast. He had this communications company and sold it to Comcast.
Yeah, and he took his millions and invested it in education at both Mercersburg and a number of other schools in the area. And so Ashley and several other students won scholarships to come to Westtown School, the boarding school I worked at, and we so appreciate you. Now, I want you to talk a little bit more about Springfield, because I might have a listener thinking, you know what, I kind of want to know a little bit more about this Springfield College. So tell our listeners, give us an overview about Springfield College, where you work, and and some of the stronger programs and opportunities that are there?
Sure. So Springfield College is actually based out of Springfield, Massachusetts. And the campus in Springfield, Massachusetts houses the traditional side, so the undergraduate and traditional graduate programs, as well as a third school, the School of Professional and Continuing Studies, which is the school that I work for. And the School of Professional and Continuing Studies is kind of a non-traditional adult themed program made to be flexible for the working adult or maybe a student that wants to continue to work while pursuing their education. We have several branch campuses in the U.S., Tampa, Houston, Texas, Milwaukee, Vermont, Boston, us in Wilmington, Delaware, just all of these campuses to make education accessible to students that otherwise thought that they couldn't juggle it, with everything that they have going on. So our students are working full time. Our students have families, but want to go back to school. And we offer programs currently niche related in human services. So we provide bachelor's and graduate degrees in human service related fields. Bachelor's degrees, for example, it's a Bachelor of Science in Human Services with optional concentrations in early childhood education, criminal justice, community and youth development, and substance use disorder counseling. And then for graduate programs, we have a mental health counseling 2-year graduate program and a 1-year MBA program in nonprofit management. And what's nice about these programs, they're called a hybrid. They're of the hybrid format. So for those that are unfamiliar with what a hybrid program is, it is about 51% on campus and 49% online. So you are coming to campus roughly maybe 2 weekends out of the month. And the time in between your class meetings, your work is supplemented with online learning. That was how we had been doing it for so long. And now we are shifting to provide even more flexibility for students in choosing times that work for them to come to school. So we're going to be offering 3-hour classes on Tuesday and Thursday nights, 3-hour classes Saturday, Sunday mornings, and 3-hour classes on Saturday, Sunday afternoons, as well as online only programs. So the students can, depending on what their schedule is from work or getting the kids from school, whatever it may be, they can kind of pick and choose the classes that work for them and their schedule. So they are making school fit into their lives instead of adjusting their lives so school can fit. And just having that increased flexibility and being able to provide these accessible programs in high demand fields, is proving beneficial and, working in the communities. These students are going back out into the communities that they're working, they've come from originally. They have jobs in human service, organizations in the community, but they're stuck. They can't move up. They feel a little complacent. They want to help more. So with these degrees, they're able to go back out there. And I said it before, become change agents and not only improve their lives through professional development, but improve their communities.
Thank you so much for that. And the website, what's the website?
Our website
Ashley?
is springfield.edu/PCS for professional continuing studies.
Ashley, thank you so much for coming on. This has just been an honor and delight. And Sushi, it's been I think 11 years since I've seen you. I think Sushi graduated in 2007, right? So Sushi, next time we see each other. All right?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next week in the news, the 3 key skill sets for the workers of the year 2030. We'll be in chapter 48 of 171 answers, and we'll be talking about the recommended timeline for taken the ACT or SAT. And it's time again for our question segment takeover with bonus content. And Mark interviews Miss Carol Conker of George Washington University, and they will be giving advice for music majors.
Listeners, I promise you we have not converted ourselves into a test prep podcast. We're just getting through this section, and then we'll be on to bigger and better things.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. And if you found this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that could really use this information. Your College Bound Kid is produced by John Lockenbaugh. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Artwork is by Andrea Togo. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. If you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340.
And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like for us to answer on the show, please email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. That's questions with an S at yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions, so send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, which is just simply yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.